Where's your honey, this one's a 50 center and this one's 99. You're giving Scholastic 50 cents. Oh, I know the music. No, under 99. Just say 99. Read.
Sound check. Okay, you got it? Okay, thank you. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. Okay, that's good. Thanks.
It was restful. We have a celebration today, and we get to celebrate the outcome of our students after this cycle and how we, where they ended. And but we know that the school year is not quite over yet. So we know that they will continue to grow until the last day of school. So we have some specific outcomes right now related to a standard or to a few standards, depending on how many you were covering with your teams. I think we learned a lot this time around, and so we want to make sure that we have the time for you to present the information about what you learned. We need to remember that the main thing for when we share the outcomes is that we are always thinking about how your instructional approaches had the effect in our students and how that impacted their growth and their outcomes. So that is really the purpose of the data team process, and it's the purpose of our celebration today as well, as we think about what our experience was in teaching and then where students started, and as you kept looking at their data with their CFAs, and then seeing the changes that you made so that students could have the outcomes that you have had attempted for, or were probably successful at it, or maybe exceeded in some of the expectations that you had. So again, with that, we are going to get started, and go ahead.
So before we get started, there's a clicker here for you guys to use for those of you that have presentations to go through. And just as a reminder, if you're up here and you need to use the document camera and it's on the computer, you hit this camera button, which is right here. And to go to the computer, you click the PC button, and it will come eventually. And then to go back to the camera, you just hit the camera button. So camera and PC, they're at the top of the document camera. All right. Do you have an order that you prefer?
Why don't we start in K5 order, if that's okay, right. And that way we can keep going. Thank you. So is Kinder ready? There you go.
Okay, so for our standard for this last cycle, we chose standard W.2, which is used drawing, dictating, and writing to compose an informative or explanatory text. So we gave a pre-test, first of all, and we scored all 5 of the areas of their writing: the focus, organization, elaboration, language, and conventions. And after we analyzed that data, we realized the area that they needed the most help in was language. So we decided to focus on the language and vocabulary, and we wanted the writing to demonstrate an adequate use of language for the text type. We wanted grade appropriate nouns and verbs, etc. And we wanted the writing to reflect the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And we really noticed a lot of our kids were still not writing in complete sentences. They were just writing short phrases or partial sentences. So we really wanted to work on having them compose what they wanted to say here first, and then be able to transfer that into their writing. So the pre-test data that we had, This is just focusing on their language scores. We only had 5 meeting on the pretest. We had 39 approaching and 23 with far to go.
We did a lot of modeling, which is a lot of what we do in kindergarten, period. A lot of modeling of how to construct a complete sentence. And we used sea creatures. Our entire unit was about sea creatures. And every week we did a different sea creature. And we read books on them, we talked about them, we did a lot of oracy activities, partner activities, constructing complete sentences. And we used a graphic organizer. Okay. Used a graphic organizer for each of the animals. For example, this one is starfish. We talked about where starfish live, and we had a picture that went along with where they live so they can remember that. Starfish live in caves underwater. Starfish have a mouth under them. Starfish eat clams. Starfish move with their legs. And so we use this to help the children develop their complete sentences. For children that were able to master their complete sentences, we added on, well, for all children we explained this, but for the children who were ready to take on the challenge, we more expected them to add this to their writing. I know things about fill in the blank starfish. First, starfish live in the sea. Also, starfish have a mouth under them, and so on. And then their conclusion sentence at the end. This was a challenge for most of our children. Some of them were able to rise to the occasion, which is awesome. And I think that's the end of it.
So then about halfway through, we gave a formative assessment to see how they were doing, and we had this time 32 meeting up from 5, 29 approaching, but we still had 17 far to go. So we really got together to brainstorm what can we do, especially with these 17 and these 29, a large number that weren't yet meeting. And we decided to have them work in partners and take the ones that were stronger in being able to make a complete sentence and partner them with those that were still practicing that skill. Have them compose the sentence together, but then have the one that was still practice dictate it. They did like a dictado to each other, to the one that was stronger, so that they got to practice saying the sentence over and over again. They got to watch the other student basically model for them, writing that sentence down. They would stop and periodically read what they had, and then the other student had to continue where they left off with the rest of the sentence. And this was very powerful. I was very excited to see after we did a couple of lessons like that, and then we let them write on their own after that. We saw a lot of improvement. So then our post-test data was, we had 39 meeting, 14 approaching, and 12 far to go. So we were a little discouraged that we still had so many far to go, but it was about half of what we started with. So, and we saw them just writing so much more. So,
A couple of examples. See, I know things about seahorses. Seahorses live in the warm, shallow water. You can see how, even if they cannot correctly spell the words, if they can't find them around the room, they're supposed to stretch them out and write down the sounds they can hear. And that's a kindergarten thing. So this is a great example of that. Seahorses have a back fin. Seahorses eat small shrimp. Seahorses move with their back fins. So overall, we were very happy with the outcome. It was quite a process, and we spent a lot of time on it, but overall we're really happy with how things came out.
questions or no?
This is when you guys applaud.
Okay, we did our one RL.9 was compare and contrast the adventures and experience of characters in the story. So we focused that throughout this whole cycle. And so why is it important to the students? Students must identify what is the same and different in their environment was one thing. And the other was students must understand the language involved with compare and contrast. And students must know how to use the skills throughout their schooling in their lives.
So we did a pre-assessment where we read a story and then they had to identify adventures for the characters and then write compare and contrast sentences. So with our pre-assessment we had 5% exceeding, 19% meeting, 26% nearly meeting, and 50% far to go. So we decided to focus on the far to go group for our instruction. So we focused on, we taught the book and taught about each specific, what an adventure is, what compare and contrast means, did a lot of examples, a lot of different practice, which we'll talk about more, and did a CFA. We had 25% exceeded, 31% met, 28% nearly met, and then far to go was 16%. And we'll talk about some of our strategies for that in a minute. And we'll show you our post-test data. So our post-assessment is 56% exceeding, so it's in the orange, and then our pre-assessment is in the blue. So you can see that basically our numbers flip-flopped from far to go to exceeding. So we had 56% exceeding, 32% meeting, 7% nearly meeting, and 5% far to go. And so we were really pleased with the work that the students did. And the way we got them to do that were some of these teaching strategies.
Brought some posters that kind of go over a few of the things that we did with the kids that really made a difference after the CFA. And one thing that all of our classes we noticed kids needed a little extra help with distinguishing between character traits and their actions. And so we really went through and what did they do? And then for first graders, a lot of time it's the non-examples as well. So all the ones that are crossed off, like, you know, she was a witch or liked to sing. It's like, well, yes, she did, but is that something that she did? So we'd spent a little extra time with what did the characters actually do, how did they move, where did they go, and that helped them with the actual standard. And then for the comparing and contrasting, we realized not having too many choices was very helpful. And so when we taught the lessons, it was usually just, if it was one lesson, one particular sentence stream that we would focus on. So we'd say, okay, everyone today is going to use Stregonona and Big Anthony both, and then the one action. And we would say, we're going to be looking for certain words. We're going to look for the conjunctions and in both. And then different lessons, we would just, you know, switch the conjunctions. And for the contrast, which was a little bit harder, something we found that was really helpful is even though it's contrasting, the events need to be connected. So for contrasting their jobs, you know, Stregonona made potions to help people. That was her job. And then we'd say, well, what was Big Anthony's job? His job was to do the chores. So their events wouldn't be totally unrelated. And once we said, well, they're things that they either do or they're happening at the same time, that really helped them to do a complete sentence. Because the contrasting, a lot of kids were doing just half of it, or they would say Stregonona made potions but Big Anthony didn't, but they wouldn't say, well, what did he do or what didn't he do? And then at some of these I just made some connections with our math habits, which was actually pretty easy to do, and just really letting them know exactly what we were looking for, what words we're looking for, their actual names, not they or he or she, really helped them to either meet or exceed.
Yeah, we also did it in like calendar. It was a shapes one, so we were comparing and contrasting shapes in calendar, using those sentence frames to write our dictatos. So I think just having it throughout the day really helped the kids to understand the concept and make good growth. Any questions?
Try and use big voices, and then also stand over here because they are videotaping it, so the microphone's right here just so that everything does get recorded and we can hear everyone.
Christina? Christina. No, I don't know. What's wrong with that?
Is it working now?
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Well, we choose our standard 2W1, which is write an opinion pieces. Write an opinion in which they introduce the topic, state an opinion, supply reasons that support the opinion, use linking words to connect opinion and reasons, and provide a concluding statement. So for that standard, we created a master rubric, and we created another a smaller version for that rubric to be used by the kids to assess or to score their own CFAs based on their opinion pieces. The students took a pre-test and post-test as well to determine effectiveness of the teaching learning strategies. For our administration of our pre and post test, before the test we introduced vocabulary by using images that were visible for kids. We read the text once to the class, and then we gave them some time to think about the opinion generating question we provided. We emphasized about the use of the different charts and rubrics to help them to create their own writing pieces. Our mentor text was nuts about peanut butter.
And this was our rubric that we created. This is our second one. Our first one, in do I have an opinion? Do I have an introduction? We said, did it have a strong introduction? Okay introduction, and we decided that wasn't quite right, so we had to really narrow it down to what was a strong introduction, what was a good introduction. So we had that posted in our classrooms, and the kids referred to it all the time. And it was really a good tool for them to use. And this was our pre-test data. We had eight students that met, 1 person that exceeded, 30% that were almost there, and 34% that were far to go. So as we were teaching, we came up with some different strategies we did. So we did an exit ticket. We'll just do it my way. This was our self-assessment that we created so that the kids could staple this onto their paper, they could grade it, and then we could grade it also, and then we could conference with them to come up with, and then they could justify their grade, and we could justify our grade.
This is the graphic organizer we used. We used the color-coded pieces, and it was really helpful for them to see what they need or what we're expecting, and then use it into the opinion pieces. So it was really helpful for them.
This is another one we did with our sentence frames on there to give them some ideas of what sentence frames they could use in the introduction, some for each of the different reasons, and also for the conclusion, as well as this is what we use for, these are just the linking words that we use that they could use with their writing. And here's our post-test data. We went up to six kids exceeded, 23%, or 23 kids were on, and far to go was only 20, so that cut it down quite a bit.
And then as you can see in our comparison, we also had a shift with our exceeding and on going up and our almost there and far to go going down. But then we also had a great conversation with Nikki afterwards about goal setting and percentages to make even more of a shift for next year. So at first we were talking about just what's a good percentage goal just to make movement. And then she said, you know, what's really the most effective would be to look at the actual, like when looking at far to go, so got out our class lists and looked at who those 20 students are and what's going on there and who are the kids, of course we want them all to improve, but who can we really zero in on to make the most gains to move them forward to the next columns or more. So based on what we found, we made many discoveries along the way. Sometimes we found that the reasons the kids came up with did not necessarily support their argument in their introduction. For example, they might say, I think peanut butter is a healthy food, and then they would go on because people are allergic to peanut butter. So we found that to be a little bit of a challenge to maybe look at for next year. Some kids demonstrated that their introductions were better than their conclusions. Some kids, instead of making a really strong statement, they made more of a reason for their introductory statement. So we have lots of things that we can do even better next year. We noticed that some conclusions were better than other areas, and we thought maybe that was because we went through the structure of an opinion piece, and conclusion, of course, was the last thing that we zeroed in on, so maybe that was the freshest thing in their mind. So yes, thank you. Question?
So we were focusing on writing opinion pieces on topics or texts supporting a point of view with reasons. So kind of similar to what second grade is. So that'll be kind of interesting to see how those kids did. We'll do for next year. So we decided, because we had just finished teaching a civil rights unit, so we wanted to see what they already knew. So we asked them a question as a pretest based on something they already knew. So our question for our pretest was, so who do you think is the most important civil rights leader and why? Introduce your opinion, include reasons for your opinion, and a conclusion. So we just wanted to see with information that they had what kind of opinion paper they could write. And based on that, our data, our pre-assessment data showed we had 0% exceeding, 8 meeting, 28 approaching, 28%, and 64% far to go. So of course we focused on the far to go. Okay. So when we got started with this, we were actually trying to combine a science unit. So we got into doing the habitats and life cycles, and that's we combined those two together, which we kind of found that was pretty challenging to do. We might rethink that later. But our first question was, after we did this, we looked at it and we were seeing that trying to do the whole thing at once was just way too much. So we decided to break our teaching into chunks
and we decided we would teach the kids how to do a really good hook and an introduction, and that's what our CFA was based on. So when we did our CFA, again, 0% exceeding, 17 meetings, 63 approaching, and 20% far to go. So after we went through the process, and then we were trying to teach different strategies, and I'll share some of the different strategies that we used and the different animals that we taught. We had gone through and broken down. We taught the hook and the introduction. We taught how to do a good middle piece, supporting your reasons, and then how to do a good conclusion. So our post-assessment, we ended up with 7% exceeding, 52% meeting, 35 approaching, and 13% far to go. So we were really happy with that, and we did base all this information. We did come up with a rubric, and we made some changes to our rubric along the way also based on what we were seeing. So I'll let, if you guys want to share some of the things that we did, then we can share the rubric.
Want me to go first, or do you want to go first? Yeah, we can start. Well, we started with fact and opinion. You want to?
Yeah, I'll share some of the instructional strategies. So we started because we weren't sure, we noticed that kids weren't really sure what was the difference between a fact and opinion. So we spent a few days just focusing on that. Obviously, this is an opinion. Miss White is the best teacher ever. But we did some different facts and opinions about concrete things that they knew about, and I think all of us did something with like a snack too, and gave them an opportunity to do some hands-on work with expressing their opinions. So once we felt like they had a pretty good handle on that, we read a book about dams, because like they were saying, we tried to incorporate some of the science standards as well. So after we read the book on dams and did some kind of close reading activities with them, we came up with a class list of pros and cons for them to see that you can really find both sides of an opinion based on a text. And then this is where we kind of decided that we needed to narrow down our gradual release of responsibility. So we decided that instead of just having the kids choose either side, we decided that we were going to choose the pros and model a whole paper using the pros, and then we were going to have the kids get into groups and write based on just using the cons. So we kind of narrowed that down for them a little bit to give them a little bit more of a focus, and that was really helpful. So after we did the pros and cons, we modeled filling out a graphic organizer that looked like this. And again, it was color-coded kind of like the second graders was, and we decided that we had to break down even more than just introduction into the hook, the reasons, and the giving an organizational structure, because that was what the standard really, we noticed that was really clear in the standard, and we noticed our kids weren't really doing that specifically at all. So we did this, and then we had groups fill out their own graphic organizers in teams using the same structure and the cons. And then and then using that, we modeled turning that into a paragraph, or 3 separate paragraphs, and again we used the color coding as well. And then for the students, I'll just show you a little example of what they did. After they did the graphic organizer, they pretty much just tried to imitate exactly what we did using their own content. So, and then we had them go through and edit each other's papers for the what's that word I'm looking for? The capitals and periods. Oh. Conventions. Thank you. It's been a long day. And then they turned that into a full one. And that wasn't quite enough, so we actually did this whole process again for extra practice with another topic in another book, just because we realized they just needed more practice, basically. We were noticing they were finally getting the hang of kind of the flow of how it goes, but they needed to do it again. So we had them do it again in partners this time instead of groups. So, yeah. And then you want to share about that?
Yeah, so we noticed, so after we did the dams, then we did the northern spotted owl was kind of the piece of content that we worked on, but then we were doing the opinion of should we protect the northern spotted owl or not, and we had to do another kind of modeled / shared
one with that going for it, and then the kids worked in partners doing it against it. And then that's when we realized with our CFA that they had struggled a little bit. So their CFA was about cats and dogs, and they had an article that they had to read about cats versus dogs. And just the article stated a bunch of reasons and explanations of why cats would make better pets than dogs, or dogs would make better pets than cats. So kind of very similar to second grade. And so then after they did that, we saw their CFA, and like, for example, this was, you know, they were stating their opinion. A dog, this kid struggles a little bit, but you can see a dog are better, I believe, because cats can't play with you, but dogs can play with you. In my opinion, dogs are better than, because cats are not scared of people. So they don't have any reasons, they don't have the hook. We noticed that they were still struggling quite a bit. And so what we did after the CFA, we kind of combined all of our students, and we revised and edited, and we made like a list of what different levels they could be. Let's see if this will work. Oh, so we showed them specifically on our rubric kind of what we expected. Like level 1 would be dogs are better because a dog can bark and they can jump on people, my opinion. So it's very short, you know, that level 1. And then level 2, they have their, you know, hook. Did you know cats are quieter than dogs? In my opinion, cats are better than dogs, but they don't go into as many details. And then level 3, they have their hook. So that was one thing that third grade we really worked on, was their hook, their introduction. What do you think is better, better pet, a cat or a dog? In my opinion, dogs are better, because if there is danger, the dog will bark to let you know. They scare off intruders, and you will be healthier. So those were directly from the article that they got. And then like a level 4 was, can you imagine having a fire at your house and having a dog there to get you safely out of the dangerous fire? In my opinion, dogs are better pets than cats for many reasons. Dogs are better than cats because they can alert their owners of danger, provide company, and help you exercise more. So, and those were actually directly from the kids from our various classes. So we showed them that, and we revised and edited their CFAs, and that really helped them a lot for their final. So this is kind of an example of like the transformation after editing. He still struggles with grammar a little bit, and spelling, but the best pet. Are you thinking of getting a new pet? In my opinion, dogs are better than cats. Dogs are better than cats because they can protect you, they can alert you, they can even listen to you. Thank you. Yeah, so and then they go on to their reasons, and they use their linking words in addition, and then they have their concluding statement there. So that was exciting to see. So.
We were really excited about our results. So
Yes.
we were real happy about it.
Yeah. Any questions?
Thank you.
Yes, it worked. That's full screen. Oh, come on. Okay, let's try this. Ah, there we go. Okay. Hello, I'll use my big voice for this one. We chose standard 4W2, which was to write informative, explanatory text to examine a topic and convey ideas and information clearly. So when we looked at this, we felt like this was a real no-brainer that we would use this as a research project for our students, because it's that time of year for kids to show us what they can do with their writing, their research skills. And so the first thing we did is we looked through the standard, And we also looked at the district writing rubric because there are those 3 rubrics, and one of them is for informative writing. And so we took a look at those and we pulled some pieces out just to clarify some ideas that were in here, mainly the language that used citing evidence and then elaborating on that evidence, which is something that I will say I didn't even really totally get until we went through that. I'm like, oh, well, that's what that is. That makes perfect sense. So lifelong learner in the process. So we gave them a pretest where we had the kids all use the same 2 sources, writing about Komodo dragons. They wrote a report, we graded it, gave it back to them. 72% of our students were identified as approaching, the rest were identified as far to go. So we were excited about that because you can only go up from there. And I like that, about teaching. So we spent a lot of time reviewing all the concepts, teaching all the aspects of report writing. We made a big push for the students to cite their sources and elaborate because we felt like that was the biggest piece that they were missing, and also the most important piece if they're going to be writing reports and thinking forward to 5th grade, middle school, high school. This is something they're going to have to be doing their whole lives until they're done with education. Well, I shouldn't say that because you might be writing reports even when you're not dealing with education. So we used a lot of Laura strategies as we collectively wrote a exemplar report about Komodo dragons, and we used that. We read it a lot of times with the kids, and they were very patient and willing to read it many times. And we picked out each little part, looked at all of the, where we were citing evidence. We looked at the introduction, the conclusion. We analyzed all of the characteristics of each, how each of those looked, how they were supposed to look. And then we did more, we went into depth even more. We had, I think, 8 lessons overall after the Lot of Laura, or including the Lot of Laura, that really just gave them everything they needed to know about report writing. And then we cut them loose to research. They were given freedom to choose a topic of their choice within parameters. Some of us had our class do state reports. Some of us had us do reports about just choosing an animal. Those were the 2 main things we did, animals or state reports. Or famous people, research, appropriate research. And after we were done, that's fun, I like that. We had 1 student exceeding, 33% met, which is up from 0% of the students. 50% of all students were approaching, with the rest far to go. Now, what we took away from this, what I thought was really great, was that, so at the end of the day, we're done, and everything's in our folder on the Google Drive. All of our lessons, all of our plans, all of our exemplars, and everything's there. So next year, it's very easy to sit down, look at this plan, lay it out, and have it even be more effective and more beneficial to all the students that were involved. And then if we need to make changes, or even tweak things as we go, very excellent process. And so I feel like we got a lot from it ourselves, in addition to our students also getting a lot out of it and learning, something that I think will last them, for a while. So that's it. Do you guys have anything to add? Thank you.
I've never done this in here.
Just
Here we are. And this should, very nice.
All right, so we are the 5th grade team. Our standard was RI 6, so that was about analyzing multiple accounts of the same event or topic, noting important similarities and differences in a point of view that they represent. So that was about finding the author's point of view of a topic and having them be able to compare and contrast those differences, not necessarily using a Venn diagram, but really noting those differences and the similarities. between the both topics.
Okay, so we'll give you the data at the end. So just to go through a lot of very similar strategies as everybody else used, of course. So thank you. So we definitely follow the gradual release of responsibility, focusing on pulling back to shared when needed. We definitely did more of that this cycle than any of the other cycles because we found a higher need for that. Even within, I know I found in my personal classroom, even within one day, even if they were in that independent piece, like finding if they weren't ready for that, like to pull back and go through it together. And I found that gave them a little bit of comfort and like just permission to kind of take a risk. And I think it was effective. So keep that in mind. Definitely the close reading we used throughout all of our cycles this year, but big this time. And we use that focusing for meaning making, for vocabulary acquisition. Sometimes we front loaded, but for most of them, they're now in the habit of using context clues, and we modeled how to use context clues several times to find the meaning. And I think it's helping them to be more self-sufficient readers, I guess. Sometimes they still need the help, but and for analyzing the point of view and identifying key supporting details. And so we had the same markings, which I have a poster of in a minute, that we used throughout the unit. I think that was really helpful to the students as well. Then descriptive feedback we focused on through verbal conferences and whole class feedback as well as written feedback. We had one general feedback form. And so on the top is like a student reflection piece, like you guys, I think it was second grade was saying too, that student reflection on what they're understanding and what questions they still have. And then we would look at it, and then at the bottom there was a teacher section to provide strengths and next step opportunities. So we tried as frequently as possible to do that, like after every partner, after every group, after every CFA. We tried. Then doing also a lot of whole class revision together. I guess that's part of the shared piece as well, but focusing on the revision and okay, we have this foundation, like where do we go from here? Because they all had a good foundation, but it was the little tweaks that are kind of holding some of them back. So I found that was really helpful to that, we found. About halfway through, we got some help, and we threw in a pictorial input and process grid to pull them back to more what point of view actually was, and focusing on tone of the author and vocabulary, actual point of view vocabulary, not vocabulary of the text. And I think that was really helpful. Then they started writing about tone instead of point of view, but then we got them right back on track. But that was a little, for next year, maybe not just put it right in the middle, like start at the beginning with it, or maybe just at the end. Multiple level sentence frames throughout, lots of ORC practice, and definitely T-charts and graphic organizers. For the first section, we focused just on how do we analyze point of view? What does that mean? Why is it important? And not necessarily the compare and contrast, because it was kind of a stair step. So we had a mentor text, Zoos Pros or Con, and it was all about a zoo expanding, this place Springfield getting a grant, and so there was all these oppositions and support of the zoo expanding or not, so they got to read about that, and so each text was kind of part of that gradual release, by the end being the CFA. And then the last part was use of text relating to recycling and plastic water bottles, like the disposable ones. So then we're using that on our next piece to write an opinion. We attempted to bundle, not yet. It'll happen next year, hopefully. We learned a couple things about it. So just some pictures of some sentence frames. This is part of the input that we used, and we had an anchor chart up throughout, just giving that foundation of what point of view really means, doing some real life examples. So that's it. And those are the markings that the students use throughout on their texts.
All right, for our pretest, we kind of chose to just look at one piece of the standard and have them be able to see, did they even know what point of view was and could they find it? Because comparing points of view is kind of a big thing if they don't even know what point of view is. So we just focused on that one piece, and they read an article and they had to say what was that author's point of view.
We're done?
Yeah, sorry. And then we have here was our data. So really showed that they didn't even know what point of view was to start with. So we had 75% far to go, 19% approaching, and then 6% were proficient.
And something to know about this, there's like a shift in point of view, I guess, because a lot of them were saying, oh, it's first person, third person, which is just interesting because that is point of view in like literacy, or not literacy, and literature, right? But this was informative text, so it was interesting. So something to think about in your grades.
All right, so for our post-test, the students had to do a close read of 2 different articles to analyze the author's point of view. They had to write a complete sentence clearly stating each author's point of view or their opinion on that topic. They also had to write a paragraph that discussed the similarities and differences between the details of the author's point of view on the topic using plastic water bottles. That was the topic we gave them. And then they had to state their own opinion on the topic using evidence from the texts, providing their conclusions were founded in information worthwhile, and they had analyzed the text to form their own opinion.
It's basically everything we worked on throughout. And you guys were talking about like contrasting details, but then making sure the details in themselves were appropriate to contrast. That's a problem we came across throughout too. So that was good to hear. I'm working on that already.
So for our data, we had 25% of our students in the far to go, but that went down quite a bit. And then we had 44% nearly approaching, 29% are now proficient, and about 1% are exceeding the one student.
So we got a little, naturally discouraged that we look at the 25%, but it was at 75, so we're just trying to focus on that. Then we're down 50%, so we're going with that. So some strengths and weaknesses, things to think about for next year. The students are able to support their own opinion with details that are appropriate. Students now know how to analyze the author's point of view. It's very clear to, I could safely say all of them, what is point of view, and they can tell you and be able to pull it out at least. Students know how to pull out accurate key details that support the author's perspective. They're not just random details. And some students are writing very clear and accurate point of view statements with very appropriate elaboration and quotes from the text. Some opportunities for growth for next year. Does someone else want to read this? Go ahead, Amanda.
I don't care. We noticed that some students were using quotes as point of view statements. So we had an example. The author's point of view is, why do we have to drink soda and sports drinks instead of bottled water? So they didn't put it in their own words. Or their point of view statement was more of a detail, and it didn't really show what the author thought about this topic. It was just, point of view is LCA. What does that mean?
What that was.
I'm not sure.
Some association.
Has the lightest environmental footprint. Some students used inaccurate details when discussing similarities between the points of view of the 2 texts, or they used things from like previous articles we'd read where it talked about how the environment, but then this one, it didn't talk about the environment. And details and supporting reasons were not specific enough.
Oh, shoot. You probably can't see that, can you? It's too tiny. So this was an example. I wish, maybe I can zoom in. No. Dream big here. But we were pretty, especially just on the foundation of where we started. That was just the first part of the assessment where they really had to think, just give the point of view of each, and we were proud of that part at least too. So we'll work on the compare and contrast more for next year. All right. That is it. Thank you.
Okay. We chose 2RL4, which is, I could put it up there for you. Oh, no. No. This one. Did everyone? Oh, but I. Okay. Is it gonna work? Okay. So Cora. So we are doing informative, we're doing an informational text. And we wanted to determine the meaning of words and phrases in a text relevant to a grade 2 topic or subject area. So it's always really hard for me to decide whether it's going to be first grade, second grade, third grade. I mean, the grade level is really challenging where to start. So we thought we'd pick 2 and just see, because this is so difficult. This is so difficult for them. They get stuck and they don't know what to do. Okay? So this is so exciting. We gave the pre-post-war, we just talked to them and asked them, what do you do when you're stuck? Because if they can verbalize and tell me what they do with an example or just tell me about it, then I knew they could do it. And so what we've done is we've just kept that going through all of their reading activities. So you're stuck, so what can you do? Because they're so waiting for someone to do it for them. Isn't that like kids, They want you to do it all for them. So the very beginning, it's going to be bad. Can I make that lower? Does it have a ball like this?
You can pull the neck out.
Oh, this? Oh, here we go. So 20% of them had no strategies whatsoever. And 60% had one strategy and 20% had 2 or more. But then we have grade levels from, first to fourth, so that's what you would expect. So the kids who could read better obviously have more strategies, which was encouraging. The post data. Nobody had no strategies. Nobody even had one. They all had 2 or more at the end. So the hard part is quantifying if they're going to transfer it and if they're going to keep using that, because they do independent reading with these book bags a couple days a week. But I have found that it's so much easier now to be able to say, what are you going to do? Instead of, they just sit and stare into space. So the things that we learned, which is probably just so obvious to everyone, is that they'll do what you teach them. They learn what you teach them. Okay, right? So very specific instruction, very targeted. Okay, each of us in our little groups, because it was all small group, had a poster that said the strategies that we use. And the ones in my group, which is lower, only had 2 or 3 because it was so much harder. But the kids that are reading at 3rd and 4th grade level had many, many strategies. And we practiced with all kinds of texts, books, and all kinds of anything we could find. And we would just go slow and say, okay, what are you going to do when you don't know the word? So at the end, they all had many, many strategies. But it was very targeted. It was very specific. And vocabulary is so huge. Doesn't matter who you are. Their vocabulary in our class, and I would imagine it's pretty much school-wide, is so low. And so they'll talk around the thing. So I have found that when we give them the words and give them the specific vocabulary for what they're learning, they pick it up so quick and they use it over and over and over. So beginning there, we taught them text features. I have been seeing that all through everything now because they get it. They have this, the vocabulary is huge. So part of this was to give them vocabulary. What do you do when you're stuck? So now no one will ever be stuck in our class again. Reading.
That's great. Sorry, we were stuck. What were some of the strategies that you were teaching them specifically, Jen? Would you mind sharing?
I did not bring that poster, but we started with the phonetic, which is probably the easiest. So we did a lot of strategies with, slowing down and stretching out the word and saying the sounds, because if they years ago I read that if they can get the beginning sound, they're probably 50 or 60% correct. But I don't want them guessing. So we use something beginning, ending, and then figure out the middle, so the phonics. And then we went from phonics to context clues. And the lower kids are using pictures, the higher kids are using the words around the words, all those context clues things. We used dictionaries, we used charts, we used whatever we have in our class. We did a lot of looking up in the dictionary, how to use a dictionary, how to find words in the dictionary, and then how to read what it means in the dictionary, how to find the ed and the ing at the end. So all of those skills is how we approach that, depending on what level you were. And just practice.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
My goodness. Well, I know that I mean, I can sense it's been a really busy day and we're really tired. This is a lot of work, teams. It's been really amazing. I don't know if you realize how much your kids grew from where they were at the beginning into your ending, your post-assessment data. It's truly very remarkable. And also, I would like to point out that your sharing today was so deep in thinking about your instructional practices that were directly tied to their outcomes. The other piece that I was very impressed with your sharing was your reflections upon for next year. What were some of the things that students were doing that that you had not maybe anticipated, and how you're thinking about it, how to address it for next year, among other things. Another thing I noticed is that there were a lot of connections, and people, when you were up here, you were making those connections with other teams and what they presented. So what I would like to do in the next couple minutes is take a couple minutes at your tables to talk about what were some of those connections that you heard from other teams, from other groups, and reflect on those. Have a conversation with your team. And then I'll call time, and then I'll give you some time to connect with each other and talk about some things. Because I think you may have found some specific strategies, some graphic organizers, or some other things that you may want to check with each other. So think first about what were those connections, and you'll have some time to talk about it with your teams. Ready? Go.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
I know. No. We ready? Okay. Okay. We're gonna come back, teams. So we have 5 minutes left, and what I would like this time to be is I would like for you guys to have an opportunity to do some connecting with each of the teams. I heard people talk about different grade levels and really explicitly making those connections, thinking about your own lessons and how it went and what you wanted to maybe think about a little more, or maybe look at a list of linking words, etc. So this would be the last 5 minutes. So if you would like to go, please, you can do that right now. You can stand up and move around the room so that you can talk to someone about something that you thought would be something that you'd like to try or add to your lessons for next year. So something that was very similar. Very amazing, extremely proud of you. Good job. And we'll keep celebrating tomorrow. How's that? So talk to each other. Yay. Thank you.